Security was on stage. The audience was screaming. And Jerry Springer suddenly stopped, removed his jacket, and placed it on the trembling guest's shoulders. That moment changed everything. The Jerry Springer Show. Studio 1A in Chicago. March 2003. Another taping. Another episode built on confrontation, secrets, and the kind of chaos that made Springer a household name for 2 decades. The stage was set up in its typical configuration. 2 chairs facing each other at an uncomfortable angle, close enough for conflict, far enough for security to intervene. Steve Wilkos and another guard stood at the edges, arms crossed, ready. The audience was packed into the bleachers, already chanting, "Jerry! Jerry! Jerry!" before anything had even happened. The episode title card read, "I slept with your husband. And I'm not sorry." Classic Springer material. The first guest walked out. Rebecca. Mid-30s. Jeans and a t-shirt. Nervous energy radiating off her. She sat down in the first chair, her hands gripping the armrests like she was bracing for impact. Jerry stood center stage, microphone in hand, wearing his signature dark suit. "Rebecca, you asked to come on the show today because you have something to tell your best friend Michelle. What is it?" Rebecca's voice shook. I've been sleeping with her husband for 8 months. The audience exploded. Boos. Gasps. Someone threw something soft that landed near the stage. Jerry barely reacted. He'd heard worse confessions before breakfast. "And Michelle doesn't know?" "No," Rebecca whispered, then louder, more defiant. "And I don't care. I love him. He loves me. She doesn't deserve him." More audience chaos. Jerry raised one hand slightly, quieting them just enough to continue. "All right. Let's bring out Michelle." Michelle stormed onto the stage before Jerry even finished saying her name. 40s. Furious. Eyes already red from crying backstage. She didn't sit down. She stood directly in front of Rebecca's chair, towering over her. "You bitch!" Michelle screamed and lunged. Security was there instantly. Steve grabbed Michelle around the waist, pulling her back. The other guards stepped between the 2 women. The audience was on their feet, screaming, phones out. This was the Springer they came for. "Michelle, sit down," Jerry said, his voice calm, almost bored. This was choreography he'd performed 10,000 times. Michelle sat, but she was shaking with rage. "How could you? 8 months? 8 months and you smiled in my face? You came to my house for dinner? You held my kids?" Rebecca's defiance cracked slightly. "Your husband came to me. He said you were cold? He said you didn't understand him anymore. So you thought you'd what? Save him? You're just a homewrecker." Jerry raised his hand. The chanting stopped. The entire studio went silent. What happened next wasn't planned. Wasn't in the producer's notes. Wasn't part of the carefully orchestrated Springer formula. Jerry looked at Rebecca. Really looked at her. Past the defiance. Past the confrontation. He saw something the cameras hadn't caught, something the audience screaming for blood had missed entirely. Rebecca was trembling. Not from anger. From something else. Her hands weren't gripping the armrests for confrontation. They were gripping them because she was barely holding herself together. Her breathing was shallow, rapid. Her eyes were starting to glaze over. Jerry had seen panic attacks before. He'd seen genuine trauma beneath manufactured drama. And he was seeing it now. "Stop," he said quietly, but his voice cut through the studio like a blade. "Everybody stop." The audience went silent. Steve released his protective stance slightly, confused. Michelle stopped mid-sentence. Jerry walked slowly toward Rebecca. Not aggressive. Not confrontational. Just present. "Rebecca," he said softly, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. "Why are you really here?" She shook her head, trying to maintain the persona. "To tell the truth." "No," Jerry interrupted gently. "Why are you really here?" Her face crumpled. The defiance shattered. And she started sobbing. Deep, body-shaking sobs that had nothing to do with the affair or the confrontation or any of the show's manufactured drama. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened 6 weeks before this taping. Rebecca's real name was Rebecca Chin. She was a project manager at a software company in suburban Chicago. Married for 7 years. No kids. Quiet life. Normal life. Until February 2003. Her husband David had been acting strange for months. Late nights at work. Unexplained charges on credit cards. The classic signs everyone warns you about. Rebecca suspected an affair but couldn't prove it. One night in early February, David came home and sat her down at their kitchen table. He didn't ease into it. Didn't try to soften the blow. "I'm leaving," he said. "I've met someone else. I'm moving out this weekend." Rebecca asked the obvious questions. Who? How long? Why? David answered them all with brutal honesty. Her name was Sarah. 6 months. Because Sarah understood him in ways Rebecca never had. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later. David wanted everything split 50-50. Clean break. No drama. He'd already found an apartment. Sarah would be moving in with him. Rebecca signed the papers. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just signed. But something broke inside her that night at the kitchen table. Not her heart. That had cracked years ago, when the marriage started dying and neither of them had the courage to admit it. What broke was her sense of self. Her identity. The story she told herself about who she was. She was the good wife. The understanding one. The one who worked hard and came home and cooked dinner and never made waves. She was supposed to be enough. Being good was supposed to be enough. But it wasn't. A week after signing the divorce papers, Rebecca was scrolling through job postings when she saw an ad. Jerry Springer Show seeks guests with relationship secrets. She stared at that ad for 20 minutes. An idea formed. A terrible, self-destructive idea born from grief and rage and the desperate need to be seen as something other than the wife who wasn't enough. She would become the other woman. Not in real life, she had no interest in actually destroying someone else's marriage. But she could play that role. She could be the villain. She could stand on that stage and embody everything she'd hated about Sarah, and maybe, she could finally feel something other than this crushing sense of inadequacy. She called her cousin Michelle. "I need your help with something crazy." Michelle thought it was therapeutic. Role-playing the affair. Getting the anger out in a controlled environment. The Springer producers ate it up. Best friends, betrayal, righteous fury. Perfect television. But what Rebecca didn't tell Michelle, what she didn't tell the producers, what she'd barely admitted to herself, was that this wasn't therapy. This was punishment. She was punishing herself. For not being enough. For failing at marriage. For being the kind of person someone could walk away from without a second thought. She was going to stand on that stage and let America hate her because at least being hated was better than being invisible. At least being the villain meant being seen. What Jerry didn't know was that Rebecca had been sitting in that audience for the previous show's taping. She'd watched another guest get torn apart by the crowd, watched the security intervene, watched Jerry deliver his final thought about taking responsibility for your actions. And she'd thought, that's what I deserve. That's the price for not being enough. Behind the scenes, Jerry made a decision that no producer had ever seen him make before. The studio was frozen. Rebecca was sobbing in the guest chair. Michelle had gone completely still, her anger replaced by confusion and growing concern. The audience was silent, sensing something real was happening but not understanding what. Steve Wilkos stepped closer to Jerry. "Boss, you want me to?" Jerry held up one finger. "Wait." He studied Rebecca's face. The trembling. The shallow breathing. The way her hands were gripping the armrests so hard her knuckles had gone white. In his earpiece, the producer was screaming, "Jerry, we need to go to commercial. Now. This isn't the show. We need." Jerry reached up and pulled the earpiece out. Dropped it on the stage floor. The producer watched from the control booth, stunned. In 27 years of doing this show, Jerry had never removed his earpiece during taping. Jerry looked at Steve. "I need you to step back." "What?" "Both of you. Step back from the stage. Give us space." Steve hesitated. This violated every protocol. But something in Jerry's voice made him comply. Both security guards stepped back to the edge of the stage, still alert but no longer looming. Jerry turned to the audience. "I need everyone to stop chanting. Stop reacting. Just listen for a minute." The audience obeyed. 300 people went silent. Jerry crouched in front of Rebecca. "Look at me." She couldn't. She was somewhere else, lost in her own spiral of shame and pain. "Rebecca, look at me." She finally met his eyes. Hers were desperate, drowning. "You're having a panic attack," Jerry said quietly. "Your breathing is too fast. You need to slow down. Can you do that?" She shook her head. I can't breathe." But this was the moment no one in the studio, and no one watching at home, ever saw coming. Jerry Springer stood up. He looked at Rebecca sitting there, trembling and gasping, and he saw something that transcended television. He saw someone who had come here not for fame or attention or even genuine confrontation. She'd come here to be destroyed because she thought she deserved it. He'd seen it before. Over 27 years and thousands of episodes, he'd developed an instinct for spotting the difference between people who wanted to fight and people who wanted to disappear. Rebecca wanted to disappear. She'd built this entire elaborate setup just to give herself permission to stop existing. Jerry reached up and began unbuttoning his suit jacket. The audience murmured. Michelle leaned forward. Steve took a half step forward before catching himself. Jerry removed his jacket, the expensive dark suit jacket he wore in every episode, the armor that separated host from guest, professional from personal. He walked over to Rebecca and carefully, gently, draped it over her shoulders. The jacket was warm from his body heat. Heavy. Real. Rebecca looked up at him, confused, tears still streaming down her face. "This is yours," Jerry said quietly. "You're cold. You're shaking. And I'm giving you my jacket because I need you to understand something." He crouched down again so they were eye level. "You're not the villain in this story," he said. "You're not even the other woman. You're someone who's hurting so badly that you thought the only way to be seen was to be hated. And I'm not going to let that happen on this stage." Rebecca's breathing started to slow. The weight of the jacket, the warmth, the simple physical presence of something protecting her, it began to cut through the panic. Jerry looked over at Michelle, who had been watching this entire exchange with growing understanding. "Michelle, I need to ask you something. Did Rebecca actually sleep with your husband?" Michelle shook her head slowly. "No. We made it up. For the show. She's going through a divorce. She's been really struggling. I thought this would help her get some anger out. I didn't know she was. I didn't know it was this bad." Jerry nodded. He stood up and addressed the audience directly. "Here's what's actually happening today. Rebecca's husband left her 6 weeks ago. He walked out of their marriage and made her feel like she wasn't enough. Like she was invisible. So she came here to my show, a show famous for people screaming and fighting and acting out. Because she thought that being the villain was the only way anyone would see her." He turned back to Rebecca, who was now clutching his jacket around her shoulders like a lifeline. "But I see you," Jerry said. "Not as a villain. Not as someone who wasn't enough. Just as someone who's in pain. And that matters." The audience began to applaud. Slow at first, then building. Not the wild Springer chaos, something quieter, more reverent. People were crying. Michelle stood up and walked over to Rebecca. She knelt beside her chair and took her hand. I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have seen how bad it was. Rebecca pulled Michelle into an embrace, Jerry's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. The two friends held each other while the audience gave them a standing ovation. Jerry stepped back, letting them have the moment. He stood there in his dress shirt and tie, arms crossed, watching quietly. Share and subscribe. So this story will never be forgotten. After the show, Jerry didn't ask for his jacket back. He told Rebecca to keep it. Wear it when you need to remember that being seen doesn't require being hated. 3 crew members later confirmed that episode never aired. The producers decided it was too raw, too real for the Springer format. But everyone who was in that studio that day never forgot it. Jerry's final thought that afternoon wasn't recorded, but audience members remember it. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is ask for help instead of asking to be destroyed. Take care of yourselves and each other. Rebecca still has the jacket.